9/11 was orchestrated by al-Qaeda, and it touched off the so-called war on terror. Let's bring in Peter Bergen now from Washington. He is our CNN security analyst and recently co-authored a report on the threat of terrorism today. Peter, welcome to the program. 12 years after 9/11, what is your assessment? What kind of threat does al-Qaeda pose today?
Well, a very different one than it did on 9/11, Christy. I mean, the fact that al-Qaeda hasn't attacked the United States since 9/11, 12 years later. The fact that al-Qaeda hasn't done a successful attack in the West since the 7/7 attacks in London on July 7th, 2005. The fact that bin Laden, the founder and leader of al-Qaeda, is dead. The fact that around 30 of his fellow leaders have been killed in CIA drone strikes in Pakistan in the last several years. And even the affiliate groups of al-Qaeda are not in great shape, whether that's in Yemen or, as we saw in Mali, with the French army going in earlier this year and rolling back an al-Qaeda affiliate that had taken over half the country. You know, that said, we're also at the anniversary of the Benghazi attack, as you just pointed out. Groups inspired by al-Qaeda in Libya are doing somewhat okay, and we're seeing the most effective fighting force in Syria is an al-Qaeda affiliate, and that is, you know, a cause for real concern.
Al-Qaeda has changed. Extremist terrorism has changed. In the wake of the Boston Marathon bombings, what is the status of homegrown extremism in America?
You know, one of the takeaways from the report that we just authored was that the domestic extremists motivated by al-Qaeda's ideology in the United States have at this point no connections to foreign groups. They radicalize largely on the internet. They don't need to go overseas to kind of meet people to inspire them. And we saw in the Boston bombings the two brothers who are, you know, allegedly behind the attack. One of them did have contacts with overseas militants, but it's not clear that they had any role in that attack. And that's both good news and bad news. It's good news in the sense that people are not getting training overseas, which makes them much more deadly. The bad news is if you have people with no connections to a foreign terrorist group, you know, are hard to detect, and lone wolves by their nature, if they're not communicating with other people, if they're really just an individual, or in the Boston case, a pair, are hard for law enforcement to detect, and sometimes they will get one through, as unfortunately they did in Boston.
Lone wolves harder to monitor, harder to detect. Now, your report also says that the number of plots and incidents involving homegrown terrorism, that's falling. Why is that? What is constraining the threat?
Well, you know, the number of indictments in the United States have been dropping pretty dramatically since 2009. And that's not a perfect indicator that the threat is declining. You know, some people may be still sort of below the radar screen, but obviously there's been a huge law enforcement effort in the United States. And, you know, I think al-Qaeda's ideology is not particularly attractive for the vast majority of American Muslims. And, you know, people are kind of tuning out bin Laden's message, thankfully. And that's also true. We've seen a declining number of plots in serious plots in, for instance, the United Kingdom. You know, even in Europe in general, you know, given the state of so many European Muslims, you know, to give you one statistic, in France, 10% of the population is Muslim, but 70% of the prison population is Muslim. So this is a very disadvantaged group of people, but they don't seem to be turning to al-Qaeda and its ideas, luckily, in any numbers.
And a final question for you, Peter, especially as Syria is dominating the headlines. Your thoughts on the future of al-Qaeda in Syria? There's a wide concern that the civil war has given rise to jihadist fighters there, and that al-Qaeda could turn into a potent force inside Syria. Your thoughts on that?
Christy, I think that's already happened. You know, al-Qaeda seems to have learned from its mistakes in Iraq. The group in Syria is sort of a splinter organization of al-Qaeda in Iraq. And they're not imposing Taliban-style rule on the population for the moment. They're even organizing things like ice cream contests and tug-of-war contests. They're holding town meetings, and they're acting in a more political manner. And they're also widely regarded as the most effective fighting force against Assad. They're battle-hardened from Iraq. They're not corrupt. They're not looting. They're disciplined. And unfortunately, they are playing, you know, a leading, or if not the leading role in the opposition to Assad right now.